Welcome to the La Grim Reaper channel, where we bring you bone-chilling true stories from around the world. From haunted houses to unexplained disappearances, we have it all. So turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and get ready for a scare. The year was 2016, and I was Henry Anderson, a high school student grinding away in the labyrinth of books and tests with one saving grace: basketball. I had always been lean, my 6-foot frame clad in more muscle than anything, with a head of messy brown hair that had a habit of falling into my eyes, often at the most inopportune times. My typical day was as routine as the ticking of a clock, a well-rehearsed dance of school, basketball, homework, and the occasional bout of video games. I would wake up with the sun, throw on my sneakers, and go for a quick run. Then after downing a bowl of cereal, I'd head to school, where I would juggle classes and the incessant drudgery of homework. But the real highlight of my day was always the same: basketball practice. I'd stay back after school, the familiar sound of the bouncing ball and the net swish always drowned out the day's exhaustion. The upcoming city championship was looming on the horizon. Our school hadn't clinched the title for the past 2 years, and the pressure was building. We needed to bring that trophy home. Every practice, every scrimmage, and play led us to that showdown. Our coach, Mr. Thompson, was a stern man with a strategic mind. He had meticulously planned our approach to the championship, drawing up new plays and pushing us to our limits. One particularly chilly Tuesday night in the heart of November, our sprawling school campus seemed eerily still. The imposing 3-story brick structure stood like a silent guardian, nestled amidst towering pines that swayed restlessly in the gusty winds. That night, I found myself at the school gym for an extended basketball practice. The championship was looming, and our rival school had a solid team. We couldn't afford to be anything less than perfect. The gym, usually buzzing with activity, was drowned in an intense silence except for the rhythm of the dribbling ball and the squeak of sneakers against the polished wooden floor. As the clock ticked away, my teammates began trickling out one by one, each exchanging tired grins and words of encouragement until it was just me left. The gym, large and echoey, felt even bigger with the void of my teammates. The usually comforting smell of old sweat and rubber was overshadowed by an inexplicable cold that seemed to seep into the air I was breathing. The dull overhead lights cast long, menacing shadows that danced over the rows of empty bleachers, turning them into silent spectators of my solitude. But the game was the game, and I needed to be at my best, so I stayed on, practicing my shots, letting the familiar thump of the ball against the floor fill the void. It was a routine evening of practice that had run late, dragging into the eerie solitude of the nighttime. I was alone, the last one in the locker room. Its normal lively chaos, filled with the chatter and laughter of my teammates, had drained away into a dead, hollow silence. Rows of lockers stretched into the shadowy corners, their metal doors ajar, revealing the usual chaos of forgotten jerseys and stray basketballs. The solitary light in the ceiling cast an unflattering pallor, flickering intermittently, just enough to carve out strange dancing shapes on the walls. I've been the last to leave before, but this time, the loneliness felt different, almost tangible. It weighed heavy in the air, like a layer of dust clinging to the stale scent of sweat and old sneakers. As I stowed my gear into my locker, I paused, the silence ringing in my ears. A creeping sensation crawled up my spine, the realization of being completely alone sinking in. A chill ran through me, unexplained, unwanted, and I shivered, shrugging off the strange unease. Then it came, breaking the silence, a rhythmic tapping echoing through the emptiness. It sounded like footsteps, slow and steady, bouncing off the cold tile walls. I froze my hand still on the zipper of my bag. The sound seemed to come from the far end of the room, past the showers, hidden in the deeper shadows. For a moment I considered ignoring it, the easy escape route of denial. But curiosity gnawed at me, a strange sense of dread and fascination pulling me towards the sound. My heart pounded in my chest, a wild drum against the backdrop of a strange silence. Gathering my courage, I stepped out from my corner, heading towards the source of the sound, completely oblivious to the spine-chilling encounter that awaited me. I had barely taken a few steps out of the shadowy shower area when my breath hitched in my throat. Under the dim, flickering light stood a figure I didn't recognize. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, blocking my way to the exit. His unkempt hair hung low over his eyes, casting dark shadows on a face that was weathered and rough. He looked out of place, an anomaly that didn't belong in the confines of our school locker room. Jake Johnson. The name clicked in my mind as I recalled rumors floating around town. A loner, unpredictable, sometimes outright aggressive. He was a local living on the fringes of the community, rarely seen but often spoke about in hushed whispers. Here he was, standing right before me, his wild eyes gleaming in the gloomy light. My heart pounded against my ribs as the stranger took a slow step forward, the scrape of his heavy boots on the floor echoing in the silent room. His sudden appearance, his massive size, and the terrifying reputation he carried made my blood run cold. Fear danced at the edge of my senses, but I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to panic. He started to speak, his voice low and gruff, but his words were gibberish, a slurred mumble that made no sense. It echoed around me, bouncing off the lockers and intertwining with the beat of my racing heart. The chilling sound felt like icy fingers tracing down my spine, raising the hair on the back of my neck. My mind spun as fear wrapped its icy fingers around my heart. A million thoughts darted through my head as my eyes darted around the locker room, looking for a potential way out. But the sight of Jake, looming like a dark cloud before the exit, kept me grounded in the grim reality. I needed a plan, a strategy to escape. The idea of confronting him directly was far too risky, given his size and unpredictability. Then a crazy idea started to form. My eyes flickered to the left, to the row of lockers that stretched out into a blind corner. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the terrifying act I was about to perform. I was banking on a split-second distraction, hoping my agility and basketball training would pay off in a life-or-death situation. With a shaky exhale, I feigned a move to the left, my body leaning in that direction. Jake's wild eyes followed my motion, his body tensing up for a chase. And then, before he had a chance to react, I burst into a run in the opposite direction. I sprinted to the right, my heartbeat thundering in my ears as I hoped beyond hope that my plan would work. Like a deranged predator, Jake lunged at me, a growl ripping from his throat, but his movements were clumsy and slow compared to my practiced agility. His fingers scraped the air where I had been just a moment ago, failing to clamp down on their target. I shot a glance over my shoulder as I raced towards the exit. He was off balance, his surprise evident in his wide eyes. My plan had worked. I could barely believe it. The adrenaline pumping through my veins felt like fire, pushing me onwards and compelling my legs to carry me faster and faster. The door was now within reach. My hand shot out, fumbling with the handle in my haste. I trembled out into the corridor, gasping for air. The heavy thud of the locker room door slamming shut behind me sounded like the sweetest music to my ears. I knew I needed to reach the security office, situated on the opposite side of the school. Finally, the security office came into view, a beacon of hope in the terrifying chaos of the moment. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, my legs shaky from the exertion. The officer on duty, a stern-faced man named Mike, looked up in surprise. My mind was a whirlpool of terror, and my words tumbled out in a rush as I tried to explain the situation. Mike's face morphed from surprise to concern as he listened to my hurried explanation. I could see him mentally switching gears, his training kicking in. He acted swiftly, reaching for the school intercom and issuing an immediate lockdown. The blaring sound of the alarm filled the school, its urgent wails echoing off the walls, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. Within minutes, the school was bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of police cars. I watched, breathless and exhausted, from behind the office window as the police officers swarmed the entrance of the school. Their swift response was comforting, but my heart continued to pound in my chest, the memory of the encounter still too fresh. I felt an unsettling combination of fear and relief as I watched the police close in on the locker room. My hands were pressed against the cold glass of the security office window, leaving ghostly impressions that quickly faded away. The flashing red and blue lights painted an eerie picture, transforming the familiar school hallway into a scene of a nightmare. Through the window, I watched the door to the locker room burst open, and officers flooded in, their voices echoing down the hall. Moments later, they emerged, Jake Johnson in tow. His face was twisted in anger and confusion, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was a captured beast, his menace restrained, but still palpable. I could hear the distant shouts of the officers as they read him his rights, their stern faces illuminated by the harsh lights. Jake, despite his situation, didn't seem to show any fear or remorse. He snarled and spat, a wild animal caught in a trap. As I watched Jake being led away, a shiver of fear crawled up my spine. The reality of the situation finally hit me. I had been alone in a closed space with this man. I could have been hurt, or worse. But instead, I had managed to escape, to raise the alarm, and now he was in custody. The whole ordeal seemed surreal, like a terrifying dream, except it was all too real. The next day, the school was buzzing with talk of the incident. The news spread quickly, and the reactions ranged from shock to disbelief. Parents were angry, students were scared, and the teachers were solemn. In the days following, new security measures were put into place. With more cameras, stricter access control, and security personnel stationed at key points, the school had become a fortress. As for me, the incident left a deep impact. I was the same Henry Anderson, the basketball team captain, the high school student, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the carefree teenager I once was. My sense of safety, which I had taken for granted, had shattered that night in the locker room. I became more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. It was a hard lesson, learned terrifyingly.
We hope you enjoyed our spine-tingling stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our latest uploads. Until next time, sweet dreams, if you can sleep at all.